Awesome. So let me start by just saying, so my name is Danny Cook. I am with ruralvote.org, which is the PAC side of ruralorganizing.org. I came to the organization in January, started out on the ruralorganizing.org side and did their exit interview project for 2022, then did this project, which is the Top 100 Rural Counties project, and then we'll be doing more of the community management for the Super PAC as we head into the election cycle. I knew Afton from a healthcare protest a few years ago that I did. And when I finished working on the Stacey Abrams campaign, she said, "Hey, do you have a gig lined up?" And I said, "No." And she said, "Well, we got a project." And I said, "I'm all for it." So I love me some Afton and the work that we do. So I'm going to go over this presentation, and then I'm also going to show you the data and kind of my process. I will tell you all that Florida was my most challenging state. And the reason why is you don't really think of it as being rural, but there are rural populations within some of the bigger counties that definitely still need to be organized. And it was your voter registration information that made my eyes go, "What?" So I'm excited to share that with you all and kind of get your feedback and tell me what you think. So let me go ahead and share my screen. And I'll let Roger in. Awesome. Move this out of the way. Hey, Roger, welcome. Everybody's just kind of throwing in their name, organization, and location in the chat. And we're just about to start the presentation, so you have perfect timing. All right. So why can't I? Oh, because I hit the wrong button. That would help, right? Okay. So this 100 Rural Power Building Counties project, I started working on in about, I don't know, April of this year. And it was really important because it wasn't just about the top 100 rural counties where we thought, we might be able to do something, but it was a completely data-driven process. And it was also focused on power building. So I'm going to show you all counties that did make the list. I'm going to show you other counties and how I dwindled it down to these that did make the list. And then we'll kind of go from there. So feel free at any point in time, if you have comments or questions, just to raise your hand. I'm down with that too. So remember that the focus on this is going to be for power building. Just because it is on the list doesn't mean it's not worth an organizing effort. And this is a short-term piece of a much longer strategy. This is for Florida. 17 states ended up making this list. All right, Canada. Candidate. I can't talk. Candidate. I see that. We need more and more and more candidates in rural places. But so this is the process. It was completely data-driven. So what I did was spent many, many hours looking at the election results from 2010, 2020, all the way through 2022. And it ended up leading me to key states, swing states, battleground states. And then what I began to do was look at the counties within those states that had margins of 10% or less. And once I did that, I made a list of all of those counties in each of these races. And so once I did that, I started to identify and cross-reference the counties against all of those races and see which ones kept showing up, right? And then once I identified those repetitive counties, then it was time to look at their populations, their percent of rural, and then common districts and seats. A lot of people want to do this in reverse. They want to do common districts and seats because there are certain people that we would love to get out of the way, but that's not the best way to go about it. The data will lead us to where we want to go. So engagement. So although, like I said before, Florida is not traditionally, a rural state, it has counties with a significant number of rural voters that could impact 2024 presidential and Senate races. And in some cases, it's smaller rural populations in larger urban counties. And in others, it's larger rural populations in smaller, less urban counties. So for example, according to our network member, Will Atkins, Osceola County, for example, has a Democratic voter registration advantage of 33,000 people. And it's populous enough that a small turnout increase could have outsized effects for statewide races. We know Rubio won this county by 1.5%. DeSantis by 6%, and a state senator Dem by 0.2%, state rep by 1.1%. So this county is next to a blue stronghold, right? Where if you organize properly, you can shift it. Other counties include Jefferson, Monroe, and St. Lucia. So this is going to be the clean data that you all get to look at. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time here because you are going to get this in an email and be able to look at it yourself. I am going to show you all of this data, but I'm going to show it to you what I call the dirty data, where I plugged it all in and kind of did all the analysis. Okay, so I'm going to put a pen right here and I'm going to shift over and show you the spreadsheet. Maybe. Nope, move. There we go. All right. So if this will, Zoom doesn't want to get out of my way. Awesome. Okay. So these are the counties that made the list. And you're going to go, Hillsborough is in no way, shape, or form rural. You're right. But it has a rural population of about 4%. 4% of Hillsborough is 52,000, almost 53,000 people, which is like a small urban town or city, right? So when you look at it that way, you're going, okay, it's about the number of people and where they're located. And for me, these individuals who are on the outskirts of some of these more urban places probably feel even more left out than the rural people in rural counties, because they are not getting the attention and they may think that they are insignificant versus what's happening. But I'm going to show you why they definitely are not. So these are the counties, and this is the prettier version before it got to the clean version you're going to get. But if you look at the presidential results, including these counties, right? So we know there was a 3.3% difference in the presidential race, which was 371,686 vote difference. In these counties, there were 357,396 registered voters that did not vote. Right? That's insane. So when you think about just organizing in these communities, that's 96% of the vote difference. Just these 5 counties. Duval was another one where I can show you some data on it. But anyway, it's to me, this is significant because you want to, and you guys can tell me this, in Florida, are you automatically registered to vote when you go to the DMV, or do you have to actually check the box and intentionally register? Does anyone know? No? Well, that's important because, if it's something that people have to intentionally choose, that tells you there's something about the democratic process that they want to be involved in. And so it's a matter of finding, why aren't they voting? Why aren't they getting out there? And we'll talk a little bit more about that shortly. But now look at the 2022 Senate race. It was a 16% difference, right? Which people look at that and go, oh my gosh, that's, when they say points, 16 points is so big. It's really not. And so the way that I say this to people is, so what if I told you that out of every 10 voters in the state of Florida, 4 of them are voting Democratic for their senator? 4 out of 10 makes it seem like it's almost 50-50, which it really is. And it gives people just a little shift in that perspective to make it a little more hopeful, a little more engaging. Another reason to come out and get with the program and cast your ballot. But there were 1.2 million, almost 1.3 million voters that didn't vote. That are registered to vote there. That was the voting difference. 736,086 registered voters did not vote in the Senate race in 2022. That was almost 58% of the vote difference. Now, here's how I got to all of those numbers. And like I said, you guys were a challenge for me because I was like, everywhere that's close are big, big counties. And so we had to do a little digging to come up with your list, but let me show you. So this is your Florida data. And as you can see, it's a big color-coded mess. You all were the last state I did, as a matter of fact. But it was about identifying counties with these margins and then figuring out, okay, so where do they fit in terms of population, percent rural, state population, all of that stuff to kind of help us guide towards the list that we were going to use. Now, the thing that's crazy is if you look at how many counties that have a 5% or less margin are actually voting. So only 4 in the presidential race, 1 county that's less than 10%, right? 5 counties. And so you're starting to see that there's an issue with voter turnout. And that picture gets pretty clear when you get here. So when you start to look at the percentage of people that are registered to vote, there is room for improvement. We would like to see these numbers between that 75, 85 range. That's a real good sweet spot. So yeah, you've got some counties where you're sitting at below 60%. And so those are areas where in your GOTV effort, you do want to look at, okay, we need to engage people in getting registered to vote. But what's even scarier is think about how populous Florida is and the percentage of the population that's actually not engaged enough to vote. So when it comes to the gubernatorial race, I'm a little, I don't know, I feel kind of fuzzy about gubernatorial races just because I worked on the Abrams campaign, right? And that's like a whole can of worms I'm not opening. But the way that I explained, what I have found in a lot of rural communities or inner city communities, they're very similar, by the way, those two things. Inner city places and rural communities don't trust outsiders. They feel left out. They don't see organizers and candidates until we want their votes. And so there are a lot of similarities between those two groups of people. And what I found doing canvassing work in both of those areas is that people were like, well, you know, it's a governor's race, it's a gubernatorial race, right? It's a governor's race. What's the big deal? So I explained it to them like I explained it to my 8-year-old grandson. when I got the position and I was going to go work for Stacey Abrams' campaign, I said, so listen, Bubby, Tutu's not going to be able to be around a whole lot because I'm going to be working on a campaign. And he said, a governor's campaign. And he said, well, Tutu, what's a governor? And I said, well, okay, baby. I said, you know how there's the president and the president is over like all the states in the country? And he said, yeah. And I said, well, the governor is like the president of Georgia, the president of your state. And so that's the way he explained it to his friends. My Tutu is working for the next president of Georgia. And, you know, saying that to people when you realize, because people know how important the presidential position is, but do they understand that that same thing is important for their gubernatorial position and, you know, their state legislature and their congressional representatives? When you look at these numbers and you're looking at 29% people coming out to vote, 30%, 37%, that gets really scary because it's not about registering people, although it is a little bit in Florida. It is really about these folks are not engaged in the voting process. So what do we do? Why aren't they engaged? And so I have this saying, and if you ever jump on calls with me, you will hear this all the time, is people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So when I'm out talking with people and I'm looking at these numbers and I'll say, you know, well, you know, 29% of the people, even though almost 60% of the people in Polk are registered to vote, like 29% are actually voting. That's a lot of people who are registered but not exercising that right. Why do you think that is? And I'll say, will you share with me, if they're not voting, will you share with me why you're not voting? And the reason I say share is because tell is very like, can I tell you something? Will you tell me? Nope. Can I share with you? Will you share with me? Because it's a collaborative effort at that point, right? So I've indicated I actually care about why you're not voting. It's not that I'm here to convince you to vote the way that I want you to vote or the way that I think that you should vote. It's I want to know why you're not voting and how can we help you get there. So these are the numbers that go all the way through from the presidential down to all the other House and Senate races. This column over here is what I did was I looked at the people that are voting other, okay? And I said, well, if we won those, how many votes would we still need, right? So Jefferson is a county that made your list. Matter of fact, these bottom three also made the list, right? So look at that. If you look at St. Lucie even, the other is 1,201, right? That's almost half of what you would need to flip that county. If you got the other 75 in Jefferson, you'd only need 500 more. When you start to look at and think back to 2020 and what was at stake, geez, oh Pete, these folks, this is just astronomical to me. So like if I do this, yeah. So there were 48, almost 49,000 people in these counties in Florida that couldn't get themselves to vote for either Biden or Trump, knowing what was at stake. That's huge. So that tells me there's something that they're not connected to. And we've got to figure out how to get them connected in the process once again. And so maybe they have politic fatigue. Maybe they have media fatigue. Maybe they think it's all gone to hell in a handbasket. We don't know, but that's why these conversations are necessary. And by knowing this information, it shows them that you cared enough to show up today. It shows them that you cared enough to get on a call to learn what's happening because you're interested in what's happening in their communities. And so I have this saying that every issue comes back to one of four things. It's either healthcare, housing, education, or economic stability or security, right? It's one of those four things. And so what I always share with people is the way to do that is to find one or two major statistics that's relevant in that county for each of those areas. So when you're talking to people, when you're giving stump speeches, when you're looking for funding, you can give information that is relevant to that specific county, that is connected to those four issues that most often impact voters and kind of challenges them or motivates them to come out and vote, if that makes sense. So if I go on down, this is where it gets a little hanky, and I would encourage you. So like Hillsborough is one, Osceola is just 9. But Hillsborough, you want to look at and find the county that has the largest percent of rural population, which is possible to do. You guys have some great voter statistics that are available when you go to your Secretary of State's website. It just takes a little bit of digging to do those. And I give you some of this information in the PDF, so you won't have to go looking for it. And then break it down. So down to here, you'll see just a little bit of a shift. So Hillsborough was in 4 districts in 2020. It's only in 3 now. Oh, I see chat. News deserts. They are underserved by both TV and newspapers. So that's really, really common. So one of the strategies that came up during the exit interview process, Jim, was because in some of our rural communities, it's hard for them to either have enough people that are staffed by news and by TV stations or newspapers, and it's hard to get enough content for their newspapers. And so we're encouraging people to write opinions to your newspapers, encouraging people to, create a group on Facebook or a page, or do something that drives engagement that gets people information. What I keep telling people, and this is really big in rural communities, is if you can keep people living paycheck to paycheck, either underinformed or misinformed, you can get away with just about anything. And our politicians count on that in a lot of ways, right? Because if I'm not sure how I'm going to feed my kids for this week, right? Or I'm figuring out where to get someone to watch my kids so I can go to my second job or my third job, it's hard for me to have the bandwidth to follow a candidate and their policies and to listen to their speeches and to figure out who's lying, who's telling the truth, and to figure out all the words that they use. Like, I don't know about where you guys are, but where I am, I hear people sometimes, we have a legal medical monopoly that was created by the state legislature under a COPA. And people think that because they're supposed to be supervised by the state, that it's socialist healthcare. And it's not. It's the exact opposite of that. It is extreme capitalism. But getting people to understand, they use words that they hear from whatever media they hear, and they don't really know what it is that it means. Now, you can't go and say, well, you don't know what you're talking about, because the automatic thing is defense, right? So it's about not telling people. So like one of the things I tell people, don't ever tell people you're voting against your own best interest, because that immediately makes them want to defend what they're doing. But say, hey, I'm not here to criticize the way you've been voting. I just want to understand why you're voting for the person that you're voting for and what issues are making you vote for that person. And if you ask that, most of the time, they don't have a clue. That's just the incumbent. Or in some rural places, that's the only person running, right? So, but having those conversations stimulates people to get curious. One of the biggest things, and I meant to say this in my last call and I didn't. So I'll tell you something brilliant that I really believe it was brilliant that Stacey did. And I think everyone should do this if you're running for office, is she had a site, a page that was pulled up, and it was like stacyabrams.com/how can we help, right? And what she had was this form that you could just fill out your name, your email address. You selected from a drop-down box what county you were in. And then there were a bunch of options of what you needed help with. Do you need help with housing? Are you facing eviction? Back then it was, do you need baby formula? Do you need help with health insurance? Do you need help getting your veterans benefits? and they would check this box. And we had a team of people in our constituent services team. And what would happen is we would have a list of local resources, local agencies in those counties, and we would be the conduit that would connect that person to the people in their community that could potentially help them. And again, what does that do? It shows how much you care before, it shows how much you know. It says, hey, I want to know. I shared that with someone. I will never forget this, sitting on the streets of Atlanta. I shared it with this girl, and we were at this restaurant anyway. And I said, has anybody talked to you about constituent services? She was like, no, what's that? So I pull out my phone and I go to the thing and I show her the drop-down box. She begins to cry because her boyfriend has recently been diagnosed with cancer. He doesn't have health insurance, and she just lost her job, and they're facing eviction. Holy crap, check a few boxes, right? And she literally looked at me. She said, God had me come here today. And I said, well, I'm glad that we could be here to help. So let me show you how to do da, 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 It's that thing. There's now a connection. I will never forget her. She will never forget me. And I can promise you, she went to vote. So it's making those kind of connections. But if I don't know how to help people, if I don't know what the challenges are in their community, I can't be of service to them. And quite frankly, I don't have the right to ask for their vote. And a lot of times we see that where people have not earned the right to ask for their vote. Do I have the right to knock on your door and take minutes out of your day? I do if I know just a little bit of this data. If I can say to you, hey, more than half the people in your county aren't voting. And you've got another statistic that I used a lot was, did you know that there was $400 million in our rental assistance fund in the state of Georgia? And under Governor Kemp, 60% of them are being denied. I said that to a college girl and she goes, oh my God, I'm one of them. And I was like, yeah, 60%. When you can just one or two bullet points are effective because it shows people that you care. Same thing with the voting. And it helps you devise your strategy. If I'm in one of these counties, I can look at the percentage of people registered to vote, and I know how much of my resources need to go to that versus how much of my resources need to go on getting these people out to vote. So it's about using the right strategy and using the data to help you develop strategy, to help you gain funding, because you can go to a funder and be like, hey, this is what the data shows. If we get X number of, of these people in this county, it will impact these results, this seat by this much. That's how you get people to write you a check. But if you just come in and say, hey, we'd really like to organize here, well, what's the benefit? What am I going to get? So this is the other piece that I wanted to show you. So this is as of the end of September this year. So these are your active voters in the counties that made the list. So for Hillsborough, Osceola, Jefferson, Monroe, and St. Lucia. I was astounded to see in almost all of them, not all of them, but almost, I think there's only one, barely two. You all have more registered Dems than Republicans. Do you see that? I was like flabbergasted. So why are we losing? Why are progressive voters not winning in Florida? How is it possible that we're losing rights after rights after rights? If there are more of us registered than there are Republicans, who's not reaching these unaffiliated voters? Because there's a whole slew of them. And these are what they call book closing. Have you guys ever seen a book closing report in Florida? If you go to the Secretary of State's website for Florida, they have what they call book closing reports. And what that is in the state of Florida, you have to be registered to vote 29 days before the election. So this is a book closing report. It tells you how many people were registered to vote, breaks it down by party before that election happened. So this is before 2020 and 2022. Now I want you to see that you're consistently losing voters. These were the numbers in 2020. Now look at them in 2023. You've lost 40,000 Dems in Hillsborough. You've lost 20,000 almost in Osceola. What in the absolute world is happening? Is anybody else shocked by that? Because I was astounded when I saw these numbers. Yes, Jim.
Okay, sorry, slow to get to the unmute. Yeah, I can see that is a major issue for us, particularly. I think. I mean, our most rural county, DeSoto, which has a population somewhat like Jefferson's, is the while they're all red counties of the three, it is the least red. Oh, is that one way of saying? Which is sort of surprising to
Yeah.
me.
So let me look at, I don't mind to look up. I love it when you guys listen, the more engagement we have on this call, the more beneficial it is for everybody who gets the link to the sucker afterwards. So let me look. You said DeSoto, is that what you said?
That's right.
All right. So so this is your stuff. So when I went to the other stuff, the voter turnout, that's where you can find some of the other reports that I use to find your data. But if I go to 2022 and federal offices and DeSoto, so I'm going to move my Zoom out of the way. So this is you. And this is how they voted. I need to look at your voter registration to see, because this is going to be like 30, you're like a 70-30 split for your Senate race. You're only in District 18. So, yeah, Roger.
Okay. The reason why it is the way it is, unfortunately, it's just as you mentioned. We have campaigners that will go out to the rural areas and say you're voting against your own interests.
Mm-hmm.
We have rural campaigners that will go and tell people how to think and what to think. Our challenge has been the actual campaign apparatus itself within the Florida Democratic Party. Now, I worked on the campaign for Lawton Chiles when he beat Jeb Bush by less than 1%. And how we approached it was we weren't telling rurals anything. We went out listening first. And then once we got the information, we could show how Governor Chiles had actually addressed their concerns.
Yep.
It has been a challenge since 1994 because we haven't had a Democrat elected for governor since 1994. We've had people come and go within the Democratic Party and with different advocacy organizations and different nonprofits who don't know what they're doing. They just don't.
Yes.
And so I'm adding this so that you can understand why the numbers are the way that they are. We have the numbers. We don't have the best campaigners going out there to talk to the folks. And when they try to do so their way, they turn them off. That's why they don't even come out to vote at all. And if you understand it from this perspective, the numbers now make sense because you can go all across 67 counties of Florida and really understand that's how it's working.
Yeah.
Now there are people, yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, you're good. So, like the other thing that I've noticed is, so like for example, where I'm at in Northeast Tennessee and Southwest Virginia, these used to be blue places. Like if you look at 2008, they were blue. But one of the things that I've noticed, so people will talk about like, well, is there a conflict with us and the Democratic Party in rural places? There's not, because for the biggest part of it, there's no footprint from the Democratic Party in rural communities, right? And so the folks that are attempting to do the work there, we've lost the ability to network and to engage. So that's one of the reasons why we do a monthly call. I lead a monthly call. It's the last Thursday of every month at 2:00. And I get people pulled together from everywhere to talk about how do we message? How do we talk? The one that I did last week. So healthcare is my jam. It's my issue. So healthcare and social justice, those be my things. And so last week I put together a whole resource and we talked about how do you talk about abortion bans, right? How do you frame it? The way that I frame it is real simple. Your morality is hurting your loved ones. Because what happens in rural communities is when you have abortion bans, it's already hard enough to recruit good physicians to rural communities, right? What we're seeing now is OBGYNs are leaving rural communities. They're leaving states where there are abortion bans. You can't get specialists to come in. So even the people that want to have babies aren't going to have great physicians to have those babies safely. Right. And we're communities that already struggle in that area. We oftentimes have extremely high maternal vulnerability rates, extremely high maternal desert rates. And these are things that people just don't know. So it's about how do we have these conversations? And so the call we had last week was fantastic. We had about 80 people that registered and almost 50 people showed up. And it was a great conversation because you've got people at any point in time, 10 to 15 different states represented on that call. And it's all a collaborative discussion about how do we address the issue. So we addressed abortion bans and reproductive health care. We addressed Medicaid expansion. We addressed rural hospital closures, because those are the three big things in healthcare when it comes to rural communities, and they are tied together. And it was so great because by the end of that call, there were people that said, oh my God, I learned things I did not know. Because a lot of people didn't know that for traditional Medicaid, the state is paying up to 50% of that cost. Medicaid expansion is only 10% because the feds pick up, 90%. Well, oftentimes once you expand Medicaid, there are certain populations within that traditional Medicaid group that you can now shift into the expansion group, and you can save what you were spending. If you were spending 40% or 50%, now you're only going to spend 10, right? So DeSoto, Charlotte, and a little bit of Northern Lee counties. Okay, awesome. So these are the things that we want to talk about, because this is what matters to your neighbor. It is not, contrary to what people believe, it's not the stuff that you hear on the news all the time. And so we have so we have to be able to take, the purpose of these deep dives is to give you data that backs up and gives you strategy foundation. It gives you some direction. If you know, oh my gosh, we have extremely low voter turnout, right? 30% of the people, then GOTV, you might split it up and say 75% is getting the vote out and only 25% is voter registration. Yep. And then it's also, so what we found is that people are more successful when they build on issue campaigns in off cycles and ride that wave into candidate campaigns during the actual election cycle. So I'll give you an example. I did Georgia. Georgia was one of the first states I did. And one of the guys on the call said, well, give me an example of that. And I said, okay, well, give me a state, give me a county. And he said, Peach County, Georgia. And I said, okay, so what's a big issue in Peach County? He said, marijuana legalization. I said, perfect. So do you know what I would do if I were you, if you really think that's the issue? I would look at a state that's legalized marijuana like Colorado. I'd find a county that is demographically and socioeconomically similar to Peach County. And then I would find out, how has it benefited that county? How much revenue has it brought in? How many jobs has it created? How many new businesses did it bring in? And then I would take that data back to my community and share it. And then I would take that data and share it with local officials. And he was like, well, holy crap. And I was like, yeah, it just makes sense, right? But
yeah, that's all you need to do.
Yeah, find the information. I believe that every issue comes back to one of four things: healthcare, housing, education, economic stability, period. And if you can address those things, especially from a fiscally responsible perspective, you can shift those independent voters. So like one of the things that I've been saying to Tennesseans, because, Bill Lee,
he's awful. He's terrible.
That's my normal response every time I say his name. But he loves to brag about how fiscally responsible they are. So this is the example that I give people. I'll say, so let me ask you a question, y'all. Let's just say that I have 3 children at home and I have $50,000 in the bank, and DCS comes to my house because my children are going to school unfed, unkept, haven't gone to the pediatrician, and they're reading on 3 grades lower than they're supposed to be. Would DCS say I'm fiscally responsible, or would they take my kids because I'm not fit to be a parent, right? And everybody goes, they take your kids, right? So take Bill Lee's population away from him because he's not fit to be a governor.
Right.
So when you say it like that, that's a very simple way to explain it, right? Everybody.
But we didn't run that way in Tennessee, because I did a lot of work in Tennessee.
Oh,
our challenge was in Tennessee, before those representatives were removed, we had that right to work that was going in on the Constitution there. And unfortunately, labor, it had to be voted twice by the legislature. In the first year, they didn't even put up a fight against it. The second year, we came one vote close, one vote short from actually having it get to the ballot as an initiative. But the problem was, it was how they were talking about the issue itself and not being able to show the data that says, okay, when you're right to work, this is what happens. Folks make less.
Yes.
And when they make less, they're now on social services
Yep.
and all those other kinds of connections. If we would have done that the first year that it was brought up, we could have defeated it even before it reached the ballot. But then we got outspent once it reached the ballot. So now right to work is in Tennessee's constitution.
Yeah. I mean,
But
there's so many things. Tennessee
Yeah.
is a good hot mess. And where I'm at,
It
so
is.
we joke, we say everybody thinks Tennessee stops at Knoxville because nobody knows what's east of Tennessee. And it's all Republican. People will say, Danny, how come you never talk bad about our Democratic representatives? Because we ain't got none. Give me one. And if they're not doing their job, I'll talk bad about them, but we don't have any. So
yeah, and that's what happened in Florida when the supermajority came in this time with the legislature. We have a situation right now where they're not even taking it is illegal for a public employer to take out dues for public employees. It's a now separate system. The teachers are in trouble because if they don't get the 60% threshold, they start to decertify their union contracts.
Oh yeah.
So yeah.
But
and
how
it
do
was
you say
because
that to someone? How do you say that to a regular voter?
how
So
we that's what I'm helping them actually do. To a regular voter, it's like we don't have enough teachers right now. We have
yep,
a shortage of teachers, period.
yep.
And what your state government has done has made it worse.
I mean,
we're having problems even attracting them.
so I'll tell you this.
So,
This is another thing that I say. So one of the things that my background is marketing, and
okay.
so one of the things I say is people don't believe when I say it. When you say it, people don't believe you, but when they say it, they do. So I
Exactly.
will, instead of saying your state government is making it worse, I'll say, well, let me ask you something. In the last 5 years, do you think the teacher situation in Florida is improving or getting worse?
Okay.
It's
Yeah.
getting
And
worse.
I've asked that question. I usually ask that question like that too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Just
Yeah.
like that. But
Yeah.
so this is why the networking calls that we're doing is so important. Um, and this is why I want to see it grow, because when you have more people that have been in the work or that have been on the ground, like I'm not a big politic girl. I'm an issue person who happens to really love people and holds on to hope. And so
Yeah.
for me, that's all I want to do is show people the truth about what's happening, simplify it for them. If we know that the average reading level in this country is sixth grade, stop using big words they don't understand to sound smart.
Yeah. Exactly.
Talk to
Exactly.
them. This is what I tell people: talk to people like they are either sitting on your couch, in your church, or at the bar. Do one of those three things, right?
Right.
Because that's how you make connection with people. Let me go back to the rest of this, and then we'll kind of come back to for final questions and thoughts. But
Yeah.
let me see. Go back to the presentation. I don't want that. I want this. Okay. So all of this data is included. I even included, you guys got extra because not every state gives me what your state gave me. Whenever I get more data, I put it in for you. So at the very bottom of this, when you get through all of it, this is your current voting data as of September of 2023. And then this is your book closing data for 2022 and 2020. So what's going to happen is when I send you your email, it will have this recording in it. It will have this PDF presentation in it, but it will also have a link to the entire Top 100 Rural Counties project. It will also have a link to the blog that I put up. The blog that I put up on the site has a link to all of the recordings for every state that we've done and to all of the PDFs for every state that we've done so far. And then it also has a link to that 2022 exit interview project. What I highly recommend is if you are going to be involved in canvassing or deep canvassing and talking to people, that is a report that you want to take a look at because it has information that's important for philanthropic organizations, for state representatives, for grassroots workers, and then be able to use all of those things together to get yourself properly funded, to get a strategy that will work. We know that we're not going to win everything that we set out to accomplish, but the idea is to move the needle and build power along the way, right? And so, because it doesn't do any good to make a little bit of progress and then it just go away. I need it to be progress that is powerful, that has meaning. So like one of the best representations I'll give is Colorado. When I did Colorado's numbers, they had 10 counties that came up on the list. 7 of the 10 ended up being, and I didn't know until I looked at what districts they were in. 7 of those counties are in District 3. That's Bobart. That means rural people are extremely powerful in the state of Colorado right now, right? So who can take that data and go to a funder and get money? Who can take that data and get organizers? Who can take that data and give people hope to really flipping that sucker? The answer isn't always money. You can raise a ton of money, but if you don't know how to talk to people, if you don't have the data to back it up, if you can't show people that you care as much as you know, you're not going to win voters. And so we've got to have this thing where it all comes together in this beautiful recipe, if you will, right? Won't do any good if I have great flour, but but I don't have eggs. I have to have everything. And it's all got to work together. I'm from the South. Almost everything comes back to food. Right. But anyway, so you guys are going to get all of this, and you're also going to have a link to join in our monthly networking calls. The next one is going to be November 30th. And I'll be leading that. And then I'm working on another document now. I don't know if I'll have it done in time for every state, but it's the counties without Democratic Party representation, because what we noticed is in some of these rural counties, you don't even have representation there from the party. You don't have a party leader, you don't have a party chair, you don't have someone. And so there are spaces that people can step up and fill those voids and lead appropriately. So I will stop right there. We've got 15 more minutes, actually 10, because then I have another one coming after that. But I would love to hear kind of what you think of the data, the discussion, anything, questions, whatever you got.
Well, I love the thought about using medical, lack of medical service as a potential issue. I hadn't thought about that in DeSoto. I just checked and I saw that they've got 49 beds in their local hospital. It's pretty small. Most of the folks come here to Port Charlotte, or they go someplace else like Sarasota or Fort Myers.
So what I'm going to do, let me give you guys this link. So, so the resource that I created, I've got to rebrand it. But the resource that I created for healthcare is super great, because it's got links where you can go and look up your state and your county's information. And what was crazy is while we were on the call, this woman goes, "Hold on, Danny, I have to say something." I said, "What?" She said, "You put the link in there." And I thought, well, I'll just look up, she was in Colorado. And she was like, "I'm in a state that doesn't have an abortion ban, right? I'm in a state that's protecting." And she said, but even then, she said, when I looked at the Eastern Colorado, which is where most of the rural places are, she said, so many of them have high rates of maternal vulnerability. So many of them are maternal deserts. And I said, yes. So imagine what it's like in the states that do have abortion bans, that do have restrictions. It gets even worse. But so hold on, I'm going to pop this over to you. At the last page of this document is super, super important, because I give you links to all the reports and the things where I pulled everything from. But also what you'll see is the Center for Healthcare Quality and Repayment Reform, Crisis in Rural Hospital. There's a fact sheet. There's an overview sheet. But if you click it, there's also a data sheet. And it will actually show you how many hospitals in your state are at risk of closure, because the numbers are astounding. So to give you an idea, more than 600 rural hospitals right now are at risk for closure. Over 300 of them are in risk of immediate closure, right? And get this, contrary to popular belief, it is not Medicare and Medicaid that's a problem for rural counties. People, so you'll hear they say it here all the time. We need to change the Medicare wage index because we're not getting paid, da da da. We get reimbursed at lower rates than Atlanta. Well, first of all, you can fact check them. You can go to CMS's Compare. They have a hospital compare website. And when you go there, there's a payment, there's a value and payment page that you can click, and it will show you how much they're being reimbursed per patient compared to the national average. Most of the time, it's almost exactly the same, maybe a little less, a little more, right? But it evens out. The biggest problem for rural hospitals is reimbursement from private healthcare companies. That's where it is. It's private. That's why a lot of rural hospitals right now want to drop Medicare Advantage. Not traditional Medicare, but Medicare Advantage, because they are reimbursing, if they pay at all, for some of these things. And so that's where the problem comes in. But so like on this document, on the rural hospital, there's only 4 bullet points there, right? All you need is 2 of them to have a conversation with someone and explain why it should all be tied together. Because you can absolutely tie abortion bans to Medicaid expansion to rural hospital closures. All of those things can go together in a very brief, concise, but effective conversation if you simply just get familiar with it. And when people say, well, that's a lot. Well, here's what I would tell you. Democracy is worth a lot because, like it or not, that's what we're facing in 2024. So I don't know, take an hour out of your golf day, take an hour out of your cooking class, take an hour out of Wordle, whatever you're doing, take an hour and go learn a few facts that will enable you to have engaging conversations with your voters. Oh, it didn't give it to you? Hold on.
No.
Let me just make sure. It should have. It says anyone with a link is a viewer. Let me just do it again. Oh, I might have copied the wrong link. I sure did. There it is. Now you got it. I copied my link. You don't want mine. You need yours. But so this document is great because it gives you some strategies on how to say things, how to use things. But it also gives you just quick, I mean, did you know that in rural communities, on average, we drive about 30 miles more than urban communities for OBGYN care, right? Most places we're driving 90 minutes. Crazy, right? In a lot of places. But you can actually look at that. There's a March of Dimes link there. You can go to your state. You can see what your state's grade is. So like if I do that right now for Florida, I just clicked it. I'm going to go to Florida instead of the United States. And our report card for Florida is a D. Florida's a D. Your preterm birth rate is 10.9%. It's been growing since 2014. It was 9.9 in 2014. It's 10.9 now. It's been consistently climbing. Your infant mortality rate, 5.8, right? But when you scroll down, it's going to show you your preterm birth rates by counties. Hillsborough is on here. But you can also go down at the very bottom. Do you see that where it says, where in Florida are mothers most vulnerable? The darker the purple, the worse it is. You will see your maternal vulnerability and your maternal deserts. And like it or not, people care about babies, right? And people care about mamas. And when you can take this conversation and say, did you know that by banning abortion care, you're making it harder on moms that are pregnant? You're making it worse for babies who are going to be carried to term because they are not going to have the doctors and the physicians and the specialists that they need to make sure that they have safe, healthy babies. Your morality is hurting the people you love. Is that what you want to do? I don't think so. I don't think that you intentionally do that. I get it. So, and I'll share this with you before we wrap up. This is what I say to people about this issue. When people say, well, you know, I feel the way I do because it's connected to my faith, I'll say, great, me too. So can I ask you a question? Can I ask? May I ask? Because I want to get permission. And they'll say, sure. And I'll say, so is your faith Christianity? 99.9% of the time, here it is. And I'll say, cool. So let me just see if you were taught the same thing that I was taught as a Christian. So do you believe that God is the giver or the creator of life? And they say, yes. Perfect. Me too. Do you believe that God is all-knowing? Does he know our beginning from our end, what we're going to do before we do it? They say, yes. Me too. Do you believe that God is everywhere present? Absolutely. Do you believe that God is all-powerful? He sure is. Perfect. that would mean that at the time God gives a woman life in her belly, he knows whether or not she's going to have an abortion. He is in the clinic when she does it, and he does not use his power to stop it. So could you share with me why you know better than God? That's it. Can you share? Because I don't know better than God. I don't think I know better. And then they're stumped. Now, they might not agree with me on the spot, but you can best believe they will go home and think about that conversation, right? I'm not going to argue with you about viability and bodily autonomy. I am going to challenge you on the thing you say you believe, because who am I to think that I know better? I don't. So anyway, these are some of the things we just want to talk about: how to use the data, how to get strategy, how to get funding, how to frame things. What's the right way to, not right way, I hate that word. What is a beneficial way that frames things to get the results that you want? Because I think we can do this. I really do. But it's not going to be about tearing other people down. It's not going to be about the funniest, most degrading meme you can post. It's not about that, right? It's literally going to be about tapping into people, connecting to their issues, showing that you care, and getting them inspired and engaged so that they want to vote again. So that's all I have for you. Does anybody else want to share anything before we go? Oh, do you want the link to the recording too? I gave you the resources link. Do you want the link to the recording? Let me do that real quick. And I have 2 more of these today. So I will try to get everybody's deliverables out today, but it might not happen until tomorrow. So give me grace. And I hope to see you all November 30th. If you all are interested in like one-on-ones, if you have a group of people that, you know, you're interested in trainings, if you're interested in any of these types of things, feel free to email me. This is my email, and we will get it on a calendar and make it happen. Boom. That's me.
Thank you so very much. Thank you.
Thank you guys for coming.
Thank you, Danny. I will be emailing you. One of the hot issues right now is the student loan issue.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a Florida A&M graduate, and just to let you know, we had nearly 22,000 applications for fall 2023 for 1,600 slots. What has become very popular is my classmate, Marianne Reagans, who runs the scholarship workshop.
Mm-hmm.
When she was in high school, she nearly got $400,000 worth of scholarships. So scholarship trainers have become very, very popular in our state in accessing, getting money for school rather than going to student loans where financial aid will put you there straight up.
Yeah.
So I've been traveling the state. I'm on another project in Las Vegas, which has a direct Florida tie, but I'm not going to share it with the group just yet. I want to talk to you about it because it has an economic impact here in Nevada as well as in Florida.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm down for everything. Like the more collaboration, the more conversations we can have, the better we are positioned to make change in 2024. Appreciate you guys. Have a good day.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.